Nurture and Support begins in 3, 2, 1.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Nurture and Support. This is episode 153, and I am Mel at Karmic9.
Hi everybody, this is Kelly at KELLYTHUL on Twitter.
And we're back for another nurturing and supportive episode, because this is what we do.
Yeah.
And on that lovely sound, I'll get into my recommendation, which is very nurturing and supportive. It's an audiobook that I just finished. It actually came out in 2012 and is an Audible original. So I don't know if this particular book can be found anywhere but on Audible. I know there is a written book, but the audio version, I'm not sure. So it's called The Antidote, and why it's perfect for this show is the subtitle is Happiness for People Who Can't Stand Positive Thinking. And it is by Oliver Burkeman. This is an incredibly entertaining book. I did not expect something that was in the psychology department to be this entertaining. So essentially, what this book is about is happiness through negativity. So if any of you follow me on Goodreads, you'll notice that my status update when I read this book was happiness through negativity. I'm so there because that's me. I would love to be happy while utilizing my natural tendency to be negative. This very entertaining book starts out with the author for research purposes being at a huge motivational seminar right here in my home state of San Antonio, and it had all the major players, including George W. Bush as one of the major speakers. And he talks about how, it's really easy to get caught up into these positive thinking things, but the reason he's there is to contrast that kind of positivity where those kind of motivational seminars tell you that you need to be positive to succeed over and over and over again. And his personal theory is that to actually succeed, you need to be negative. And one of the funniest parts of this particular part of the book was one of the other people at the thing in the audience was a guy named Joe, who was a park ranger here in Texas, who was required to be there by his job. They sent him to this, and he was like going, yeah. Can I go now?
I'm motivated.
Yes, that's what he was doing. I was like, Joe was my stand-in at this seminar. So it was just really entertaining. And when it started out that way right here in San Antonio, I was like, I think I'm going to like this book. So he goes into a lot of different philosophies and talks to a bunch of different other people in the whole, personal development market about this idea. One of the things that he talks about in the book that I wasn't really as familiar with were the Stoics, the Greek philosophers. I know I covered this at some point in school, but it was so long ago I blocked it out. So I really didn't remember a lot about what the Stoics were about. Primarily the things he's talking about in here are the Stoics and Buddhist philosophy. And I actually have read a lot about Buddhist philosophy. And so I actually found, for any of you interested, that because he removes the religious aspects of Buddhism, I think is why it made it a little bit easier to understand. He did a really good job of explaining some of these basic tenets of Buddhism, because Zen Buddhism and all of that is about letting go of things that you want. And it was really a good way to approach it, I thought.
And oddly enough, the primary storyline of Frozen.
Yes.
I had no idea that was actually a Buddhist propaganda film until now.
Yes, there you go.
Excellent.
Let it go. So this was well worth a listen. If you have an Audible subscription, I really recommend using one of your credits on getting this book. The audio version is only 6 hours and 17 minutes long, and he is really entertaining. The author actually narrates this book and does an excellent job. It's really fun. You wouldn't think that you could make something about the Stoics and being negative, how to find happiness through negativity, as something that actually you could make entertaining. But he manages it in the way that he presents the information. He talks about one of his experiences for research because of the everybody tells you should meditate, and this is how you become happy and you learn to let go of things. And so he went to a week-long retreat to learn meditation, and they actually were not allowed to speak for the entire week. And you actually weren't even allowed to look at the people around you, because you would then start communicating with facial expressions and not your voice. But they didn't want you to have any communication. Basically, you were alone in rooms with all these other people, and it was nonstop meditation. And he talked about how his process of freaking out during that, and then how he eventually, at the end of it, he missed all the meditation. So it's really, to me, I found it really interesting. So I don't want to spoil anything for anybody, but if you're somebody who tends to be a little negative, or, as I like to lovingly call myself, a realist, then this book might be for you and give you a little bit of a deeper understanding of the underlying principles of why we realists believe that we're a little bit happier, because you don't, when you imagine, one of the principles he brings up in here is that when you think things are going to be bad, always imagine the absolute worst it could be. And you're almost guaranteed that it's not going to be that bad. So anything that's not that has got to be, not horrible. So you'll survive. You will get through it. And that was a good point that I understood but hadn't really verbalized in my head, that I can now throw out at certain people in my life when they start freaking out about things that they shouldn't freak out about. I can bring up the worst case scenario and go, hey, it's not going to be this bad, chances are. So he goes into a lot of other stories. There's a story about a pubic louse that he buys.
Wait. Back the truck up for a second.
Yes. And
is that an Amazon purchase?
He did not buy it at Amazon. He actually bought it at auction. So
what?
It was, yes, there was I don't remember what he called it, because it was in London. It was some big thing that anybody over there would recognize. But
everyone knows London is the pubic louse capital of the world.
They had one of these huge things that had the human body. It was like, a travel through the human body. And it was very realistic. And they even had a pubic louse. And wherever he was working at the time, he's a journalist, I think they gave him $100 to go to this auction and cover it and, get something. And he bought a pubic louse. So
what does a pubic louse go for?
He didn't say, but it ended up that he never got it, because by the time, you weren't allowed to leave until all of the auctioning was over, and the big, the big auction house cleared everything out and made the books match and everything. Well, it turns out when he went to pick up his pubic louse, it was missing. So I was very disappointed for him. He never got his pubic louse. That's just how it rolls sometimes. It's the worst case scenario. It's the worst that's going to happen. You don't get your pubic louse. So one of the interesting things that he covers is some studies that went on over the psychology of Mount Everest and some of the people who have died there. And it was really that was really interesting to me. It really was a very extreme example of people doubling down on a bad decision. And that's really, it really kind of went, oh, I see that happening every day around me. We see that playing out on a national scale of people doubling down on really bad decisions. And that opened my eyes a little bit. And this book isn't at all political. It's written way before our current times, if you're thinking I'm trying to slide in a political text here to anyone. This book was written in 2012, so there you go. Way before our current troubles. But I found it really entertaining. The text of the book is just as good, but I did really enjoy the audio version available from Audible. So that's called The Antidote, Happiness for People Who Can't Stand Positive Thinking by Oliver Burkeman. And I really think the stories in this book are really great. And they teach you something. So, as all good stories should do.
So many connections on your recommendation here that I need to articulate. First, there's a Facebook group. It's called Harbor Day that I am the sponsor of, which I don't believe you're a member of, Mel, are you?
No, I am a member, but me and Facebook.
Yeah, that's fair. But I am totally going to, when we get this version out on this podcast out on YouTube, I will be post, because this is the kind of book that will speak to that group. Yes. Of course, they will immediately attack me for self-promotion and all those kinds of things, and because that's kind of what the group does. But it'll be fun. So this is a perfect book for that group. So I'll just tell them to shut up and listen to your recommendation, and we'll do that. So that's good. The other connection, and what we do know, while the nurture and support audience isn't quite as massive as Mel and I had hoped to eventually build, we're going to continue to plug away at it. But we can always count on one download, and that's our good friend Mike. Mike is a very loyal listener. And much of your recommendation reminded me of the other podcast I do, because when you talked about just try and imagine the worst possible outcome, and then it won't end up that way. I do that before every squat cobbler, and it's worse. It's worse. So there's that. Doubling down on a bad idea. I see a connection there as well. And if you were to have asked me to place a wager on which of the podcasts that I work on would have the term pubic louse occur the most frequently, I probably would not have predicted nurture and support.
Right. And you wouldn't expect that from a, quote unquote self-help book here, sort of. And there you go. I was as surprised as you, and I had to keep listening until I got through the chapter that finished telling you about what happened about the pubic louse, because he introduced it kind of like I do. Hey, I got a pubic louse. Story next.
Da, da, da. That's sweet. It's no pranaconda egg, but it's pretty cool.
Yes.
All right, that's awesome. So more parallels to come, because I'm recommending a book as well.
Cool.
I'm recommending a book that's largely based in Texas as well. And the difference is, because of kind of how you roll versus I roll, you tend to recommend things in this decade. I tend to go more vintage, retro, shall we say. The kids today love the retro. So this book was actually released in 1981.
All right.
It is called Best Evidence, and it's by David S. Lifton, and it's about the Kennedy assassination. So to kind of cheer things up a little bit here, let's talk about an assassination, because that's always nice from there.
Again, imagine the worst case scenario. Only it didn't work here.
This is a fascinating read. If you got to think about timeline here a little bit. So this is 81, and it was actually turned down by 20 out of 21 publishers turned down doing it, and eventually somebody did pick it up from there, but it was viewed as just too controversial to some degree to kind of put out. And then you think about our world today, and it's like, in terms of what kind of gets thrown out as conspiracy theories and all that, and there's a lot of problems with my wiring. I'm willing to kind of admit that in terms of how I go, but there are certain things, for some reason I have this undue fascination to kind of dig out on YouTube. And one of the things, sadly, is kind of the whole O.J. Simpson stuff all the way through, and to kind of just continue to see different pieces of that, because I just find that whole dynamic interesting. And the other one is always the Kennedy assassination and all the theories that are out there for that. One reviewer of this book described Mr. Lifton's discussion as almost impossible to follow, almost impossible to believe, and almost impossible to refute, which is kind of an interesting combination of three things. I don't want to spoil the core tenet on what he kind of based on. He does a lot of research. He brings a lot of facts to kind of come forward and talk about that it wasn't a single gunman. So we'll kind of say that, but the mechanism, the process to kind of make it look like one is a lot of what he talks about in this book, and it is fascinating, and it is meticulously researched. The guy did a tremendous amount of work, and a lot of it came from the title Best Evidence comes as he was discussing with lawyers around. He's a physics major. He was a contractor for the Apollo program. He did a lot of different things. But we're back to the James Garrison back and to the left, back and to the left. The physics of kind of when you see the Zapruder film, there's a question to say this seems like odd physics for a shot from behind. And so that started him just wondering. He saw a physics thing, but then the Warren Commission report came out and came a much different storyline of what they were doing. And he's like, well, okay. And he got that and read it. And he began to then gather some information. But the lawyer's position is best evidence is not the physics, is not the eyewitness reports, but what is considered in a murder, best evidence is the autopsy. And so a lot of his book is around, you could come to a conclusion about what happened based on the autopsy, but let me tell you why you probably shouldn't trust that autopsy. and so that's a lot of what he kind of goes into and says there might be some interesting things to consider here from there. It is like I said, very, very fascinating. And I'm not a big conspiracy guy. I do continue to be troubled and it's always hard to pull out. Okay, so what's just become folklore versus fact and fiction? But it just does seem like there are just a couple elements here and there that they go, well, that doesn't seem right. Whether it was the cartridges found where J.D. Tippit was shot by Oswald, was there a hole in the front windshield of the limousine that Kennedy drove? The fact that the limousine that Kennedy was killed in, not Kennedy drove, but he rode in, obviously. But that it was immediately cleaned. That's a crime scene, and it was immediately
pretty big crime scene.
Kind of an important one. Kind of felt like a little yellow tape might have been warranted on it, but just some interesting things on there, and a lot of it could be people pulling at threads to kind of spin something up. But I think it, at a minimum, is highly entertaining. There's a lot of folks who kind of feel that this is one of the most out there theories about some of the things that could happen. And I get that, because when you actually kind of come to his fundamental premise of what he says happened, it is quite the story of what happened. But when he stacks some things up, you can go, that's, again, I think a little difficult. First of all, I didn't find it hard to follow. I saw where he was going. It seems like a hard thing to comprehend, but it's like, well, how can I just totally refute what he's saying? And it's like, well, boy, if some of these facts are there. But so it's a real interesting read from there. So it's Best Evidence by David Lifton. I don't know if there's an audiobook version available and who does it, if it's read, but I think it's actually pretty cool. And so, and I'm kind of a mark for these things. I do kind of enjoy the various YouTube lectures that all these different folks come in, and he's not a kind of conspiracy guy by nature. He's just kind of honed in on this one based on kind of some of his background, some things he saw. And so he doesn't make his stock in trade and trying to spin these yarns up and all that kind of stuff. So It's actually a really good read. And since a lot of the key things happened in the great state of Texas, you got that connection there. So David S. Lifton's Best Evidence is my recommendation for this week.
It does not look like it's available on Audible, probably because it's older.
Yep.
And if it was, if it was indie published, there might be a problem there.
Well, it's not indie published. I think Macmillan actually picked it up, but
okay.
But you may have to just. I will assume you can go through the fine. It's available on Goodreads.
Yeah.
So there's some places that you can kind of get to it from there, but it is and
I'm sure all of my half price books, used bookstores down here probably have a copy. That's big. It's a big interest here in Texas. It's something that we never really forget about. So it's common. I forget when is all of that info supposed to be released? Not that, unlike Kelly, I love a good conspiracy theory. I find them fascinating to read about conspiracy theories. But yeah, at this point, I'm not sure what any of that we can actually believe anymore.
No, you don't. And so I do find it entertaining, and I'm all about reading a non-crazy guy or crazy girl conspiracy theory thing, which I think Mr. Lifton falls into pretty accurately. Yeah. But it's some of the folks that have a broader issue that I don't quite dig as much from there. But yeah, I think it's, like I said, I know you like to read. I do think you will find this one to be a page turner, because it is pretty cool. It was actually also the first book that came out that published some of the Kennedy autopsy photos. Those was the kind of first time some of those came out. Again, 1981. A book is the way these things come out. Internet world today, it's like, oh, big deal. I can, I'm one search away from 8 million sites that can give me about everything that I want to see on that type of thing. But that's another piece of it from there. So it's, like I said, I think it's pretty interesting thing, and I bet you it's probably a copy or two's available at one of your used bookstores. So I'd grab one of those. So it's a good read.
Yeah, I like reading all that. I'm not as well versed in all of the Kennedy conspiracy theories, but I've read a couple of books on that. So one of the funniest is an audiobook by Richard Belzer called UFO, JFK, and Elvis. And that's an old audiobook. That's where he's talking about different conspiracy theories. And because he's a comedian as well as an actor. And that's a funny audiobook if anybody wants to check that one out. He does touch on some JFK stuff, but there's some Elvis stuff and some UFO stuff, but it is funny. So whether you believe the stuff he's saying or not.
Well, we all know the facts that Elvis traded places with an Elvis impersonator,
right.
Was making a living as Elvis impersonator, broke his hip, got put in a nursing home in Texas, and had to fight a mummy. We know that that's what happened. Yes. That's the facts.
We know that Bubba Hotep is real.
It's a documentary.
It is. So.
And JFK is in Bubba Hotep. So there you go.
Full circle, y'all. Full circle. That's what Nurture and Support provides.
This is the connectivity you can expect on a every 150 or so episode basis.
Yes. So there we go. I do not have a social media recommendation this week. Kelly, do you?
I do. So I think probably some of our listeners are aware that The Walking Dead has been shedding viewers significantly over the past couple seasons, that it seems to be going down. And Fear the Walking Dead, which kind of came out, I felt didn't start all that strong, but has actually become, from a viewership standpoint, it's still not as strong as Walking Dead, but it's actually turning into be a pretty good show. So this past Sunday, season 8 of The Walking Dead concluded, finally, and they did a kind of there's a crossover of a character into Fear the Walking Dead, and they did basically back-to-backs where the premiere of the new season of Fear the Walking Dead followed the conclusion of it. And it was a great show. I really enjoyed the first episode of Fear the Walking Dead. I've hung in with it. I've started to warm to it. My biggest issue is I'm not a big fan of any of the characters, or very, very, very few of the characters do I root for at all. And probably the reason I like this most is that almost the entire episode was Lonnie James Morgan from The Walking Dead, and two new actors to Fear the Walking Dead. Garrett Dillahunt from what is it? The Western Deadwood. So he's from Deadwood, and he was actually in the running to play Negan before Jeffrey Dean was selected. So he's joined. I love his character's name, John. Amazing character. So finally, there's a character on The Walking Dead I totally dig, and I actually like the second character they introduced in this first episode, who's Althea, and that's Maggie Grace. And Maggie Grace goes way back to Lost, and she played the blonde girl in Lost. She's no longer blonde in Fear the Walking Dead, but she's also kind of an interesting character in it. So they introduced these two new characters and Morgan crossing over, and we didn't get to see. It was like I totally was loving the episode, and in the last 5 minutes, some of the original cast showed back up. I'm like, oh crap, that's right, they're all here.
So maybe now some of them can die.
Yeah, I think this would be a good thing. But it'll be interesting to see. But it was actually, I felt, a very, very strong episode. So my social media recommendation is actually at Fear the Walking Dead, which is the Twitter handle for the official site for that. And it's a good Twitter handle to interact with, because if you are actually become interested in the show, you can kind of connect up with them, and they'll start firing off to your Twitter account. Hey, here's a sneak preview of the next. So it's not insider information. Obviously, millions of us are getting it, but they're doing a nice job in staying kind of connected with the fans. And so I think they're doing a really good job on the Twitter account. And I'm encouraged by what I see on this first episode of Fear the Walking Dead.
Now, is that going to take the place of The Walking Dead's time slot now on Sundays?
Yes. Now, I don't know when Preacher comes back. I don't know what day that's going to go on. But that'll be, because it's not too far away, and our good friend Julianne Emery will be back in full force on Preacher, so that'll be pretty darn fun.
Yeah, I don't know the time slots, but Westworld is back on the 22nd.
That's
so sorry, Westworld wins. There's a conflict.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to work through that. We'll have to keep talking about that, because Westworld deserves additional conversation, because that is a fantastic show.
Wonderful. So my wallpaper on my computer right now, I changed to that little robot buzzard and the black cat.
Nice. I'm
so excited that Westworld's coming back, and guys, I haven't turned my TV on, I think, since Game of Thrones ended. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. So with Preacher coming back, Westworld, we still bide our time for Game of Thrones for another year, I guess. And I said Fear's coming, Fear the Walking Dead at least coming. This continues to be. I mean, there's just, and I don't know if you've watched The Expanse at all. I keep hearing very, very good things about it.
It's another one of those shows. If I had time, I would watch. But all the different shows that are coming on Amazon, Netflix, Hulu, I get overwhelmed with all the shows to watch, and I end up watching nothing. I just go and add them to my queues. Someday I'll get them watched. But Westworld will be everybody. So
yeah, totally worth it. I am so excited to see that come back, because I really enjoyed the first season so much.
Yes.
So it'll be good.
Show. But yeah, I have seen on Twitter an increasing fan base for Fear the Walking Dead. So that was good. While I have also seen many of our former cohorts who were crazy about The Walking Dead, I have seen them bailing. I bailed years ago before it was cool. I continue to hang in. I do think that Jeffrey D. Morgan, I think Negan is an incredibly difficult character to bring to life, and I'm very impressed with how he's done that. They're doing some interesting things with, I don't know if interesting is the right word, but they're doing things with Rick that, I don't know, make it hard to kind of be always Team Rick on some things, which the comic has never had an issue with. And the thing that probably frustrates me the most is they had this material here, all out war. This is the whole Saviors versus Rick.
and all of the kingdom and all these types of things was some of the most engaging. That's probably, to me, the strongest part of the comic throughout its entire life, was this whole all-out war, and to drag it out to 16 episodes, and you knew kind of where things were going. It was just I don't. It just seems like they're milking it more than they need to, and it shows in this kind of very extended take of how it's gone in. So there continues to be some folks shedding it, and a recommendation from a long time ago, a podcast. It was called The Talking Dead. Jim and Aaron, and I really love their podcasting stuff that they do, and they do this full time for a living right now. They're fantastic. They've kind of come to the decision that this is the last season of The Walking Dead that they're going to do the reviews for. Yeah. And they've been in it forever. They're going to still maybe do like a live watch, so you can kind of come on and watch them how they react to the show itself, which is kind of cool if you're they have a membership kind of structure in place to allow them to be professional podcasters, right. And worth an investment. I recommended it before, something for you guys to look at. But they're bailing, and so it is interesting. It'll be good. But I do think Fear has worked through a couple issues in the first season to kind of hit an interesting cadence. And like I said, I really enjoyed the first episode quite a bit.
Yeah. Well, The Walking Dead tends to do that. That's when I bailed, was when they spent that whole season going in a circle with the governor and all of that crap, and it didn't need to happen. That's when I bailed.
Yeah, this idea of kind of constantly revisiting certain struggles, and whether it's with Morgan or with the governor or some of those pieces, it feels like they're treading water on some things. So I still watch it. There are moments I truly enjoy it. There are moments I'm like, I think this could be a little bit better, but we'll see how it goes. And they do need to work with their directors a little bit to understand. They got almost an Ed Wood-like misunderstanding of night and day in terms of on certain scenes. Like, so wait, the sun's up, the sun's down, and so it's like Plan 9 from outer space, which you would think they wouldn't need to do.
Yeah.
So I have nothing but good things to say about our good friend Matt this week, and he is going to give you all the information on how you can connect with us on the various interwebs, and hope you do, and hope you offer up some recommendations yourself, and we're going to kind of work to get. It's been a little while since we've had a guest. Don't count Mike as a guest. And we'll have to get to. We'll bring some of the old favorites back on here sometime soon. So, before we hand it over to Matt to give all the information, any parting comments, Mel?
Westworld.
That's a good parting comment. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.
You can contact us on our website, nurtureandsupport.net, or email us at nurtandsupp@gmail.com. That's NURTANDSUPP@gmail.com, or tweet us at nurtandsupp on Twitter.
Nurturing and supporting Journey.